Be talking about, I think, something that I find very interesting. It's about 8 Washington. How many of you have heard of 8 Washington? Can I get it? Pretty familiar with it. It's a pretty interesting thing, this 8 Washington. What's unique about it is we're talking about a single building that triggered a ballot initiative because of its height, because of its use, because of maybe how the Board of Supervisors responded without really, I think, checking for sufficient community input. You know, it didn't meet what's called the conditional use requirements for the neighborhoods, so they had to take it before the Board of Supervisors. We're talking about a large luxury building on the waterfront with $1 million plus condos. So they had to get approval for the Board of Supervisors, and yet they voted almost unanimously in favor, kind of shocking people. And so in response, over 30,000 signatures were gathered pretty quickly, pretty easily, to put this on the ballot as to whether we should allow a building of this size. The issue isn't luxury, by the way, it's just of this size. But it's really an issue of class, too. And anyway, we'll let the speaker address it. Speaking in more detail about this is Joe Gollinger of the Washington Height Increase Referendum. So I'll let him say more about that.
Thanks.
I hope I didn't bias the audience.
No, it's John. John Gollinger. Sorry, let me pass around my pamphlets. More.
Oh, I got that in the mail.
Good evening. My name is John Gollinger. I'm the campaign director for No Wall on the Waterfront is the name of our coalition. We are fighting against the plan to increase height on our waterfront for this giant project for millionaires and billionaires. Not for you and me. First, I wanted to ask a question. How many people in this room either remember or have heard of the Embarcadero Freeway? Used to run along the waterfront. Almost everybody. People that, for those of you, I don't want to bring any bad flashbacks, but for anyone who doesn't remember what it looks like, this is what it looked like. And we've got a fancy version on the cover of our brochure. But it was literally a giant 70-foot concrete wall. A wall that ran from the freeway, the Bay Bridge Freeway, all the way up the Embarcadero, as you recall, to Broadway, and then cut off. Literally the freeway to nowhere. And we bring it up because, as I'm sure all or most of you remember, it was put up in the 50s and it lasted till 1991. And it only came down for 2 reasons. One, an act of God. Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, I'm sure many of you experienced. But really, it only came down. I mean, that's what damaged it. But there was a huge push from our business community and others to repair it and expand it. It only came down because an act of the people. The people of the city made it known to the Board of Supervisors and Mayor Agnos at the time that they wanted that thing down. And I don't, some people it was in part because freeways are bad, we don't need freeways. But the broader issue, I think, that united all of us then, and we hope will this November, is that San Francisco's waterfront doesn't belong to a few people that may happen to live there. It belongs to all of us. That's right. All of us. Everywhere in the city. And that's what this measure is about. So the measure that will be on the ballot this fall is, as was mentioned, a referendum on whether the existing limits on height should go up for this one project. And that's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing for several reasons. One, literally, as our brochure says, and our name says, it would be the first brick in the wall on the waterfront. It would create a giant barrier on the Embarcadero at Washington Street, almost across from the ferry building, that would literally begin again to separate the city from the bay. The 8 Washington building would be 136 feet if they win. That would be more than 50 feet higher than this. So if you thought this was bad, forget about the ferry building if they build it all the way up and down the waterfront. So literally it would create a wall. Number 2, it would begin to reshape our waterfront. I mean, I'm sure some folks in this room have been to Miami, Florida. Yeah. If you have, you know there's many beautiful things about Miami, but almost in all cases you can't literally see the water unless you go around the giant buildings. Then it's beautiful. Yeah. But if you're in the city, unless you can pay the access to the waterfront or find your way through it, you can't see it. Here in San Francisco, we can. And that's because of the long-standing limits on height that we've had for many years. And there's an incredibly good reason not to change them. I mean, what the developer is saying is this is just one project. It's a small little wall. There's other big buildings not far away. What's the big deal? But it would not only create a literal barrier, but begin to set the precedent for up and down the waterfront, creating special upzonings in every case. And there are enough. This is a lot. The reason this is in part a big issue is that part of the land they want to build the 8 Washington building on is actually owned by the people. It's port property. That's part of the leftover waterfront property that we own. And there are a series of lots, mostly used as parking lots at the moment, which is not the ideal use for the future. But the port has been looking for ways to squeeze more money out of them, and you can be sure the current administration, the current port commission, and the developers would love to turn every one of those lots into a high-rise building. We need to stop it. So what we've done, as was said, was this project did because the 8 Washington developer hired HMS Associates, which is one of the most powerful lobbying firms in town. They paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars to lobby every supervisor and find the particular argument that worked with all of them. They dominated City Hall. They unfortunately convinced some of our friends in labor, some of the construction trades, that short term it will create building jobs, so you should be for it. Unfortunately, that worked with some of them. So the neighborhood, environmental, and community groups fought it, but we lost at City Hall. So we did what the Constitution of this state enables us to do, but is rarely done, which is we challenged a decision by City Hall. We put it to a vote of the people. That will be on the ballot this November, and it's a referendum on 8 Washington. The way to vote if you agree with us and you think things should stay the same is no. Vote no, wall on the waterfront. It's a little tricky because usually when the people put something on the ballot, you want to pass it. But this is the opposite. We put on the ballot an up or down vote on what the City Hall folks did. So if you're for what City Hall did in raising the height limits, you vote yes. If you're against it and you want to keep it the way it is and stop the wall, you vote no. I'll mention a few more things. Number one, the issue literally on the ballot is about the height and the waterfront, but it's a broader issue. The tenants union and affordable housing community is strongly on our side because this is housing for the uber wealthy. And if they come forward with a proposal to keep it at the existing height, but still build condos for millionaires, that would have persuaded some people to stop, not oppose it. But the reality is it the best use for our public land to create condos that will cost an estimated $2 million on the low end to $10 million up in those penthouses? Is that the best use of your and my public land? That's a real question. And then the last thing I want to mention is the developer of this project did figure out that if it just goes to a vote of building a wall or not, they may lose. So what they've done over the last week, and you may have read about this in the Chronicle last week, was they came up with what these folks do when they start to get squeamish and get worried they might lose, is they throw a Hail Mary, and they've come up with a confusing counter-proposal that they're going to try to put on the ballot for this November. So there will be 2 8 Washington measures on the ballot. And what they've done is I read their proposal, it's 55 pages long, 13,000 words. 13,000 words, and it's called San Franciscans for Parks, Jobs, and Housing. That sounds pretty good to me. Jobs, parks, and housing. I like all 3. But there's 13,000 words. I read them all. There's 10 words in their measure that matter. Raises waterfront height limits from 84 feet to 136 feet. Exactly the same thing that the measure we're challenging does. So what they're trying to do is take a bitter pill, dump so much sugar on top of it that they force it down our throats. But what we're going to be doing, we've already started, we'll be doing it every day through November, is getting the word out. Vote no on the height increase. Vote no on the deceptive 8 Washington ballot measure that sounds good but is poison pill for you. So those are things, and just lastly I'll say that counter-proposal I mentioned, they'll be collecting signatures most likely starting next week, and they have the right to do it. They'll pay people big money to get it on the ballot, so we have no doubt it will probably qualify. Whether you decide to sign it, if you see it, I will leave it to you, but know what you're signing. And I'll take questions, but we're asking, we're building a citywide grassroots coalition. We've got the Sierra Club, the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, the Richmond District Democratic Club, Potrero Hill Democratic Club. I would ask 2 things of you tonight. Number 1, for you as a group to endorse our campaign and for you each to get involved, endorse a no vote on these measures. And number two, we're hoping that Walter Paulson will come up with a special campaign song for us. No wall on the waterfront. I think you could find a way to turn that into something. I'd be happy to take any questions. Yep.
No and hell no.
No. I like it. That could probably be a song too. Yes, ma'am.
What are the other, how many thousand words say
Yeah.
that are on their measure?
Good question. What are their arguments? Yeah. Their arguments, thank you for the question. The question was, what are their arguments? What does the rest of their countermeasure say? What they'll be saying is, it's worth it, basically. That, yes, we're going to increase height. Yes, we'll block the waterfront. Yes, it's a bad precedent, but it will, we'll spend some extra money and we'll build a new small park right next to the condos for millionaires. And we'll be on the waterfront. I've seen the pictures. They're very pretty. So a pretty free waterfront park for you and me. That sounds good. As I said earlier, we'll create jobs for construction workers. And then housing. The city law requires, as many of you know, that big developments like this include a percentage of affordable housing, either in the building or they pay a certain amount of money into the Affordable Housing Fund. Now, how many of you think of the 134 units in this luxury condo, how many units do you think they're going to put in there for affordable housing? 10? No. 20? 10. 0 is the right answer. 0. 134 units in the building, not one affordable. Now, the law requires them to put money into the Affordable Housing Fund, which can then be used to build affordable housing somewhere else. They will do that. And the number that they were forced to put in is $11 million. So their pitch will be $11 million for affordable housing, which sounds good to you. But they have to do it by law, so they're not really doing it for our benefit.
We're kind of running out of time, and what we need to do now is with the members, and you can always talk to them during the break because we're going to have food in a minute. The club needs to come up. The club needs to, yes, we have to move on because we have time. We don't have, you can talk to them during the break, please.
I want to say something that everybody can hear. Most of the waterfront is built on fill. If we put these big, heavy, tall buildings on there and we have an earthquake, guess what's going to happen? Yes.
I'd be happy to talk to anyone else.
Yeah, we're going to have a break in a minute. So we want to entertain
Everybody,
motion.
please, if you can get their attention to my...
Yeah, we want to entertain a motion from their members so that we can support the how's it going to be called?
No wall in the waterfront.
No wall in the
Oppose
waterfront campaign.
Fugly8WashingtonApr2913Y.
So I think you heard the gist of it. People have campaign material.
Yeah.
So I need somebody to call the question.
Motion to support, and maybe if they actually, when they do the ballot designation, it'll be done. But I make a motion to support no on the wall.
Second.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor say raise their hand. That's a way to do it. Okay. Any no's? Then raise your hand. We got no's. And any abstentions? If you're gonna, the media can abstain if they're not. So the motion carries. But we're trying to get done this because we have to kind of move along. You can talk to the speaker afterwards. Huh? Yeah, but
I hope that we can develop a bill that is